This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. It is one of our favorite episodes of the podcast every year. Episode 329, the 2023 Best in Beer episode, part 1. Part 2 will be the critics portion of our Best in Beer episode duo. For this episode, we are going to share with you both our editor picks for our top 20 beers of 2023, as well as our reader's choice, the items, the breweries, the themes, the places, the cities that you chose as your favorites of the year. And joining me as always to co-host this episode, Joe Stange, joining from Bangkok.
I am delighted, really delighted. It's always a good feeling to get to do this with you, Jamie, because we worked so hard on this issue. And then when we get to record this and talk about it, it's a really nice closure.
It's an immense amount of planning, immense amount of logistics, and then the fun part comes where you get to share it with all of you and where breweries get to share and celebrate their successes of the year. It's such a cool, energetic thing, but it's also a great opportunity for you and me to talk about, the year, what we've seen this year, what we're watching in terms of trends, how we're seeing things develop, what we're seeing brewers do, and also talk about it in a way that, let's just kind of dive into some of the things. Before we get started, we do have an Austin Brewery Accelerator. If you are a brewery and planning and are thinking about launching a brewery, go to breweryworkshop.com. Check out the information about our Austin Brewery Accelerator next March. It's an invaluable tool for anyone who's looking to start a brewery. It's a great place to go. If you are a brewer wondering how you can send us beer for review or for consideration for things like this annual Best in Beer issue, go to beerandbrewing.com, click down to the very bottom of the page footer. There's a help center link. Click on the help center. And within there, we have a whole article on how to get your beer reviewed in Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Walks you through all of the process, has an editorial calendar, as we review specific styles in every issue. Then in the Best in Beer issue, for example, in this Best in Beer issue that we just put to bed, we also reviewed Saisons, farmhouse ales, mixed culture beers, as well as seasonal beers, so Oktoberfests and Märzen beers. So we have deadlines for when you should send us, what you should send us when. We like to spread these reviews out across the year and focus each issue on that because it is the most, it's the most valuable way to judge beer, judging like with like and judging large flights of the same style beer so that we can have context for all of these kinds of judgments. With some of that out of the way, it is now time to get down to it. The digital edition of the Best in Beer issue. By the time you are listening to this podcast, will have been emailed to all of our subscribers. Print copies are scheduled to arrive within the next week. Next Friday on the podcast, we'll drop the Critics List podcast with Kate Bernat, Stan Hieronymus, Courtney Eisman, Alex Kidd, and of course, Joe right here. They'll join me to share their favorite beers, their hot takes, trends, etc., experiences, places, their ideal beer bars, and all the things that they chose for their favorites within their critics lists. Fun way to get a broad, nationwide, all United States kind of approach to what's good right now. Before we get down into the winners for our editor's picks and as well as our reader's choice, we want to talk about our methodology. But first, for years, G&D Chillers has chilled the beers you love, partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across the country. They're proud of the cool partnerships they've built, offering 24/7 service and support. G&D builds with non-proprietary parts, expert craftsmanship, and constant innovation. G&D's in-house engineering crew have been piping breweries, wineries, and distilleries for over 30 years. They offer free piping design and consultation with the sale of every chiller they build. Reach out for a quote today at gdchillers.com or call to discuss your next project. Also, support for this episode comes from BSG. Looking for a sustainable way to increase fermenter capacity? Try FermCap Eco from Kerry. Developed as part of Kerry's Eco brewing range, FermCap Eco is a plant-based alternative to traditional silicon-based products. FermCap Eco increases fermenter capacity by reducing foam height to improve beer foam stability and enhance hop utilization. Visit bsgcraftbrewing.com or contact your BSG sales rep to get started. And is your brewery making its own ciders, seltzers, and other beverages beyond beer? If you need a central source for fruit flavor, Old Orchard has you covered. Old Orchard supplies flavored craft juice concentrate blends to beverage brands for the production of beer, cider, seltzer, wine, spirits, kombucha, and more. Flavor your lineup and streamline your sourcing by heading to oldorchard.com/brewer. All right, Joe, I am going to take a sip of one of our beers of the year right here and make sure that my throat is well lubricated for all of the conversation that we're about to have right here. Why don't you talk to everybody about our Reader's Choice methodology, how we create a reader survey, poll everybody, and then what happens on the back end when we process all of that information?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. The invitation goes out to y'all by email. It's up on the website, and hopefully as many of you as possible jump in there and register your opinions on your favorite beers, your favorite breweries, your favorite styles to drink and brew, and more. And so it's always fun to see how that shakes out. It's to the extent possible, it is not multiple choice. We want you guys to just answer as best you can, and that means there's a little bit of cleanup on our end, as far as Jamie's end, I should say. He does most of that. But
little bit is putting it lightly. Let me tell you how many people spell Three Floyds with THREE versus those people that spell Three Floyds with a 3. Yes.
You gotta get those. All the cantillions, and you got to get all that sorted out. Yeah.
We take your survey results, we process them, we come up with what you have selected and apply these. And if you are looking at the print or the digital PDF or app version of the magazine, you will notice that all of these categories that you voted on as readers have a bright pink background, a magenta background. And so it's very easy to track what is reader determined in that way. And our editorial picks for our top 20 beers of the years that come out of the editorial process are all on a typical white background and our typical running type. And so in case this is in any way confusing, we just want to explain that to you. If you see it in that bright, shocking magenta background, that means that's something the readers voted on. And if it's something with that nice beige background, that's one of our critics lists. Those are personal opinions for our critics. And if it's in just a normal white background, then that is coming from our editors. That is part of our editor pick process. And so, of course, you may be asking, what does that editor's pick process look like? Joe, why don't you, again, tell them what it means?
Well, you were talking just a minute ago about how to find out how to submit beers via the Help Center on the website. But basically, it's exciting because the process that culminated in this issue is now starting all over again. And it's cool to think about that and to watch. Basically, it starts with the brewers, and you all are deciding what beers to submit to us and to submit to our blind panel review. And that is really where it starts. So you guys decide what to send in. That goes before the panel. There's some selection because there's more than the panel itself can judge. Then you score high, then you're in the running, basically. So it's this winnowing down process that goes all year. So almost all of the beers that we consider for the editor's picks come through that process, that blind judging process. Then we get together at the end of our year, let's say our editorial year, because for us this marks the end of our magazine year, I suppose, and we taste them blind again. We go through the finalists and we taste what we can. Now the ones that score really high are pretty much usually locks.
Yeah, for any given issue, we have separate categories. Those top scores in each of those categories in all of our issues throughout the year get automatic consideration for our beers of the year. Not every one of those top scores, it becomes a beer of the year because we have more than 20, and we also want to keep it open to other styles that are broader than just those very specific styles that we tend to review in each issue. And so we have this kind of open-ended submission specifically for the best in beer issue, where we ask brewers to, again, send anything that we may not have sent specifically for an issue earlier that year, as well as going back through and tasting some of those highest scorers earlier in the year, and we go back and do that again so we have a context. We do that over several days here in the office, along with Stan Hieronymus and Kate Bernat. And this year we also had Patrick Dawson, the beer writer, who helped out for one of the days of judging. And we tasted through these beers again, tasted through beers that we didn't review over the course of the year, just so to make sure that we had a broad base to pull from as we were making some of these decisions. And then we sat around for a few hours and debated heartily about what would actually make what we wanted to lift up. It is a process that starts with thousands of beers. Those thousands of beers we all taste in any given year. It becomes narrower with, because through that course of the year, we'll review we'll taste probably 300 or 400 beers that are sent to us for any given issue of craft beer and brewing. From there, we might review through that blind process about 150, 160 per issue. And out of those, that we then review for each issue, we're pulling part of this list and we're pulling the rest of this list from those that are sent specifically for this issue. Does that make sense, Joe? Am I explaining this right?
I think so. It makes sense to me. I think it's significantly better than knowing how to make the sausage, I guess.
Should also note that all of our reviewing and all of even our blind tasting through this best in beer process is all done blind, so that no one knows what they are tasting as they're making decisions about these things. And so we find that anytime you see a score in Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, you can guarantee it has been judged blind. The only relevant and valid beer scoring for us has to be done blind. And that the more palates that we have tasting them. And then through any review that you find in Craft Beer and Brewing, there are going to be two judges as well as one of our editors who are also tasting those beers in order to make sure that we have got multiple palates on every beer. We find that just creates the broadest approach to each one of these beers and helps us. There are plenty of beers that'll stand out to one judge, but the best beers we find resonate with everybody. They find this broader based appeal. It's not that one is not good just because it only appeals to one judge. It just makes it that much more interesting and that much more compelling when we find beers that are equally compelling to a larger number of folks that are tasting them. And so that's the way that we approach it, just so that everyone understands how we do that. Let's kick in and start talking about Reader's Choice first before we get into our editor's picks for our top 20 beers of the year. This category of readers' picks that our readers voted on is favorite breweries, and we have divided these up by size. We divide up by size because we want to keep the playing field fairly even. Certainly, the larger the brewery is, the more potential people they could have voting for them. We are equally interested in breweries that brew under 5,000 barrels per year, as we are interested in breweries that brew over 100,000 barrels a year. And each one of them are in different categories. Let's start from number 10 to number 1 with a countdown of our readers' favorite breweries, small breweries brewing 5,000 barrels per year or less. Joe, why don't you count them down for us?
Coming in at number 10, we've got Cellar Maker in San Francisco. At number 9, Side Project in Maplewood, Missouri, aka St. Louis. 8, Goldfinger in Downers Grove, Illinois. Number 7, Burial in Asheville, North Carolina. Number 6, Monkish in Torrance, California. At number 5, Hill Farmstead, Greensboro Bend, Vermont. Number 4, Bierstadt Lagerhaus in Denver. Number 3 is North Park in San Diego. At number 2, Highland Park in Los Angeles. And then your number 1 favorite small brewery, fewer than 5,000 barrels per year, is Green Cheek in Orange, California.
Strong showing from the Southern California voters in this year's Readers Survey. Next up, our top 10 in the small regional breweries. That's 5,000 to 25,000 barrels a year. Number 10, Weldworks in Greeley, Colorado. Number 9, Live Oak from Austin. Number 8, Bottle Logic in Anaheim, California. Number 7, Schilling from Littleton, New Hampshire. Number 6, Pint House out of Austin. Number 5, California's Ghost Town and from Oakland. Number 4, The Alchemist from Stowe, Vermont. Number 3, Alvarado Street in Monterey, California, and Salinas. Number 2, Trillium in Canton, Massachusetts. And number 1 in the small and regional brewery, 5,000 to 25,000 barrels per year, Hop Butcher for the World out of Chicago.
So for mid-size regional category, that's going to be from 25,000 to 100,000 barrels a year. At number 10, we got Half Acre in Chicago. At number 9, Fort George in Astoria, Oregon. Number 8, Toppling Goliath in Decorah, Iowa. Number 7, Revolution in Chicago. At 6, Maine Beer in Freeport, Maine. At 5, Other Half in Brooklyn. At 4, it's Freem in Hood River, Oregon. Number 3, Breakside in Portland, Oregon. At number 2, Tree House in Charlton, Massachusetts. And your number 1 favorite brewery in this size category is Russian River in Santa Rosa, California.
They've got quite a legacy in that category so far. All right, now next up is large brewery. We're calling this 100,000 barrels per year plus. And the number 10 spot, Trogs from Pennsylvania. Dogfish Head's number 9 from Delaware. Number 8 spot, New Belgium from right here in Fort Collins, Colorado. Number 7, Stone from Escondido, California. New Glarus is number 6 out of Wisconsin. Number 5 is Founders from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Number 4, Firestone Walker out of Paso Robles, California. Number 3, Allagash from Portland, Maine. Number 2, Bells out of Kalamazoo, Michigan. And in the number 1 spot, Sierra Nevada Brewing out of Chico, California. Next up, we're going to continue with reader survey. And in this next bit that we're going to share with you, we decided to split out not just by size, but breweries based on what they brew. Because certainly brewers that brew in some smaller beer categories may not find themselves as overall popular. But it's also important to highlight breweries that are focusing on and making styles of beer that may not be the biggest mainstream sellers, but are also just important to the world's story of beer. So in this Who Brews It Best, we will give you the top 10 from each category. Of course, there are 20 in each of these categories. And if you want to read the full lists, then you need to subscribe to Craft Beer Brewing Magazine. Go to beerbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, and we will give you that digital issue immediately, give you access to that in the app, because we depend on your support to be able to do this, to be able to produce content, and it is your support that makes it possible for us to do that. Anyway, let's talk about Who Brews It Best, and we can kick it off. You know what? I don't want to kick it off with American IPA or Hazy IPA. I think we should leave those for the end. Let's start off with Pale Ale. Your favorite Pale Ale brewers. What's the number 10 spot, 10-1 in favorite Pale Ale brewer, Joe?
All right, at number 10, we've got Freem. Number 9, Hill Farmstead. Number 8, Tree House. 7, Breakside in Portland. Number 6, Oscar Blues. Number 5, Half Acre. Number 4, Cellar Maker. At number 3, it's Green Cheek. Number 2, Three Floyds. And your number 1 favorite Pale Ale brewer is a little brewery called Sierra Nevada.
You know, it's not even fair in that category. If you looked at it, Sierra Nevada should have probably had the first 10 spots on that list. That if you divided up all the votes they got, even in the number 10 spot, they would still have more votes than the next brewer. They are so dominant in that category. It's absolutely incredible. The next category, favorite stout or porter brewer, the number 10 spot, Left Hand. Number 9, Fort George. Number 8, Firestone Walker. Number 7, Deschutes. Number 6 is Bells. Number 5, North Coast. Number 4, Bottle Logic. Number 3, Goose Island. Number 2, Side Project, moving up from number 6 last year. And in the number 1 spot again this year, Guinness. Let's talk about lagers, Joe.
All right. So your top 10 favorite lager brewers. And again, for the complete 20, subscribe to the magazine, get the print edition. Not too late to get in your mailbox here in a couple weeks. Favorite lager brewer, number 10, Wayfinder. Number 9, Dovetail in Chicago. Number 8, Suarez Family. Number 7, Schilling. Number 6, Jack's Abbey. 5, Highland Park. At number 4, we have Freem. At number 3, Samuel Adams, Boston Beer Company. Number 2, Goldfinger. And your number 1 favorite lager brewer, according to our readers, is the Bierstadt Lagerhaus in Denver.
Well done, Bierstadt, and everyone else on the list. Let's talk about favorite sour or wild ale brewer. And in the number 10 spot, Alvarado Street. Number 9, Great Notion. Number 3, Driefonteinen. Number 7 is Side Project. Number 6, out of Tillamook, Oregon, DeGard. Number 5, Jolly Pumpkin. Number 4, Cascade out of Portland, Oregon. The number 3 spot, Cantillon. And the number 2 spot, Russian River. And reclaiming the number 1 spot this year, Austin, Texas's Jester King. How about Saisons, Joe?
Oh, I love these. All right, favorite Saison brewers, the top 10. Here we go. At number 10, Ommegang. At number 9, Wolves and People popping into the list. Number 8, Allagash. Number 7, Side Project. At 6, Fair Isle in Seattle. At number 5, Jester King in Austin. 4, Sante Adarius. Number 3, Hill Farmstead. Number 2, Boulevard. And your favorite Saison brewer is the Brasserie du Pont in Torp, Wallonia, Belgium.
Well deserved still. Let's talk about favorite Abbey-style brewer. The number 10 spot, Unibrew. Number 9, Duvel. Number 8, The Lost Abbey. Number 7, Rochefort. In the number 6 spot, Ommegang. Number 5, Allagash. Number 4, Westmalle. Number 3, Chimay. Number 2, St. Bernardus. And in the number 1 spot, it's the St. Sixtus Abbey, West of Letteren. And I'm sure I butchered that one.
No,
but,
that was good.
All right. Why don't you walk us through hazy IPA brewers, Joe?
Okay. At number 10, Other Half. At number 9, Pint House in Austin. Your number 8 favorite hazy IPA brewer is Sierra Nevada. Number 7, Trillium. 6, Weld Works. 5, The Alchemist. Number 4 is Monkish. Number 3 is their neighbors, Green Cheek. And number 2, Hop Butcher. And your number 1 favorite hazy IPA brewer is Treehouse.
Now let's talk about your favorite American IPA brewer, starting with number 10, a brewer that I'm drinking a beer of right now, Fatheads out of Ohio. Number 9, Hop Butcher out of Chicago. Number 8, Treehouse. Number 7, Stone. Number 6, Bells. On the strength of Two Hearted. Number 5, North Park, moving up the list. Number 4, Breakside. Number 3, Sierra Nevada. The number 2 spot, Green Cheek. And in the number 1 spot, Russian River. Once again, also dominant in that category. No surprise at all. Well, let's flip it forward a little bit and talk about your reader favorite beer cities. We, this year again, decided to ask you for both your favorite international cities and your favorite U.S. cities. Quite a bit of movement this year, I think, on that U.S. city list. It's always interesting to see where the votes come from. And they are, sometimes breweries make a little bit of get out the vote push. And I think we saw a lot of that both in Chicago and in Southern California this year. Some breweries that pushed out. And so we saw a lot of representation there. And for anyone who thinks, maybe that's not fair, all I can say is, it's open to everyone. Share this with your customers. Help them become readers of craft beer and brewing, and help them vote for great beer or the best beer as they see it. Anyway, let's talk about our top 10 U.S. cities. Joe, what's that number 10 city?
At number 10, Austin, Texas was 14. At number 9, Grand Rapids, Michigan. That was 13. So you're seeing the movement here. Number 8, Los Angeles, which wasn't on the list last year. Number 7, Boston. Number 6, Portland, Maine. There's some different Portlands, Number 5, Denver, which was 3 last year. Asheville, North Carolina was 1 last year. Now it's 4. Portland, Oregon is at number 3. At number 2, San Diego. And your number 1 favorite U.S. beer city right now is Chicago. And I think that's a great pick. And I think it's cool to see it getting recognized.
What a great beer town. Lots and lots, fantastic breweries. Lots of great breweries, great beer bars, and a great tradition of brewing there in the upper Midwest. Let's talk about international cities, and we'll start this one at number 10, Copenhagen, Denmark, in that 10 spot. Number 9, Bruges, Belgium. Number 8, Bamberg, Germany, a place that Joe and I got out to earlier this year. Can't wait to go back. I highly recommend beer travel in Germany with Joe. He is the best tour guide that anyone could possibly ask for. Number 7 spot, Amsterdam, Netherlands. Number 6, Cologne, Germany. Number 5, Dublin, Ireland. Number 4, London, England, a place I'm going to go head later this year, a couple weeks. Number 3, Prague, Czechia, another city that Joe and I got to earlier this year, and what a phenomenal beer city that is. Number 2 spot, Brussels, Belgium, of course, and in the number 1 spot yet again this year, Munich, Germany.
That's an interesting one, right? It's number one again, and it's obviously on the strength of Oktoberfest and Helles and it just being a beautiful place. But is it really the best beer city? Anyway, maybe that's another podcast.
If there's an editor's pick for best international beer city, Joe, what's your editor's pick?
Oh, I'm totally biased toward Brussels, but Prague is there, Bamberg. Those are my top three.
So they're well represented in this list, even if they're not in that number one spot where you would particularly put them.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I'm happy to see Brussels up there.
All right. Well, let's talk about favorite beer bars. This is a category that Joe and I are particularly motivated around with a deep amount of love. It's been a tough year for beer bars. We've seen a lot of challenges out there, and I just want to say it if I haven't said it enough times. Beer bars are absolutely crucial for beer culture. We have been hardcore supporters of beer bars and the place that they play in beer culture since the very first of this, the issue of this magazine. Our Love Handles department, since the very start of the magazine for the last 10 years, has aimed to highlight some of the best in places to drink beer that are not brewery tap rooms around the world. And, so I just want to implore everyone out there listening to please support the beautiful places, local and further afield, where you can go and drink great beer. And as brewery tap rooms are an important part of this as well, but don't ignore great beer bars in this, in this overall celebration of great beer culture. They are absolutely crucial, absolutely integral, to the culture that breweries and the craft beer in general has created here. And so that's my monologue. I know you don't disagree with me there, Joe.
No, tap rooms, brewery tap rooms are getting better and better all the time. And they're, in a way, the reality is they're kind of cannibalizing the beer bar space. That's just reality. When you go to a city and you're trying to figure out where you want to go drink some great beers, you're thinking of breweries as well as you're thinking of beer bars now. It used to be just beer bars. So that's the reality. It is kind of taking up that headspace for us, but bars have had to up their game. There are still lots of great ones out there. And if you want them to exist, get out there and support them.
100%. I have been spending more time drinking beers at locals here in Colorado rather than just drinking at home, because especially after spending some time in Prague, like it kind of reinforced to me just how much more fun it is to drink socially and drink in these social spaces rather than just holding up with my beer and going deep inside of it myself within my own head. There is something beautiful about that act of drinking together, and it's something that we should not lose even in this kind of post-pandemic world as we're trying to figure out what our new social normal is. Nonetheless, let's talk about best beer bars around the world as voted on by the readers of Craft Beer and Brewing. In the number 10 spot, Orange and Brew out of Downers Grove, Illinois. The number 9 spot, another one from Chicago, the Beer Temple. The number 8 spot, Motor Lambic in Brussels. The number 7, Tap and Handle from Fort Collins, Colorado. Number 6, Church Key from Washington, D.C., one of my faves, and one of our longtime contributors now, Greg Engert, for the Brewing Industry Guide, key player in Church Key. Number 5, Brick Store Pub, got there last December. Beautiful, beautiful spot in Atlanta, Georgia. Number 4, Navari Rez in Portland, Maine. Number 3, Toronado, classic. Number 2, Monk's Cafe in Philadelphia, a place I first went to 20 years ago. 20 years ago this year, Joe. And in the number 1 spot, representing Chicago, like I said, the Chicago voters came out in droves this year. Hop Leaf takes the crown for number 1 beer bar this year.
Congratulations, Hop Leaf.
Absolutely. So next up, we're going to share with you our Reader's Choice. That's our Reader's Choice for their top 25 beers, or I should say your top 25 beers of 2023. But first, ProBrew is excited to announce that they are currently featuring short lead times between 2 and 4 weeks for their in-stock ProFill rotary can fillers. These can fillers run at speeds between 100 and 600 plus cans per minute while achieving precise and consistent filling volumes not achievable by most inline and mobile fillers. For more information, fill out their contact form on www.probrew.com or email contact@probrew.com to learn exactly how they can take your operations to the next level. ProBrew, Brew your beer. Also, you like wildly aromatic IPAs and tropical lagers? Good thing Omega designed thiolized yeast just for that reason. Thiolized yeast are a new tool for brewers to bring intense guava and passion fruit aromas out of your malt and hops. And wait, there's more. Omega yeast makes a yeast to order with a consistent 1-week lead time, ensuring peak freshness and reliability. All right, let's talk about a reader's choice for our top 25. And it is 25 this year. We are making it harder and harder for breweries to appear in our readers' top list. So these are the top beers as voted on by the readers of Craft Beer and Brewing. And let's just break these up. Talk about the top 25 to 20 there, Joe.
All right, at number 25, New Glarus Spotted Cow. Number 24, The Alchemist Focal Banger. At 23, Sierra Nevada Torpedo. At 22, Pilsner Urquell from Pilsen in Bohemia. Number 21, Green Cheek, The Other Brian. At number 20, Pint House Electric Jellyfish.
All right, and number 19, Orval. Number 18, Firestone Walker's Pivo Pills. Number 17, Alvarado Street Mai Tai IPA. Number 16, Breakside Wanderlust. Number 15, The Alchemist Heady Topper.
At number 14, we got Freem Pilsner. At 13, Goose Island Bourbon County Stout. Number 12, North Park Hop Fu, popping into the list for the first time. Number 11, Highland Park Timbo Pills. And it's going to number 10, Extra Stout from a brewery called Guinness in Ireland.
On the number 9 spot, Saison DuPont. And the number 8 spot, Bierstadt Lagerhouse's Slow Pour Pills. In the number 7 spot, Treehouse Julius, jumping way back up the list this year from the 24 spot last year. And in the number 6 spot, Sierra Nevada Celebration, a much-loved beer amongst those in the beer industry.
For your top 5 Reader's Choice beers, your 5 favorite beers, according to you, 5, Allagash White. Number 4, Russian River Blind Pig. Number 3, Bell's Two-Hearted IPA, which was 5 last year. Number 2, which was 3 last year, Russian River Pliny the Elder. And your number 1 favorite beer is Sierra Nevada Pale Ale again this year. Congrats to all the favorite beers.
Man, they have really been consistent with that in the Sierra Nevada side over the last few years. A lot of love there, a lot of love. And I certainly can't disagree with our readers or all of the love that people share with all of those breweries. It's also great, and let me just say this, to see so many classic beers in everyone's top 25. As much as important as new beers are, and as important as it is to celebrate innovation in the world of brewing, I'm also really glad that every year we can celebrate these beautiful beers that brewers make year in, year out. Wonderfully constructed beers that they keep brewing in such beautiful ways and making such beautiful expressions of the brewer's art. So, having said that, it is now time for us to roll into our editor's picks for the best beers in 2023. Again, as we mentioned at the top, these are beers that we choose from the beers that our blind panel has rated highest over the course of the year, as well as beers that we taste blind through our best in beer judging process, and also add into that consideration. And then when all of those things are said and done, we've got a big long list of these top beers, and we whittle it down into what we say, what we feel, and what we think are our top 20 beers that sum up this year in beer for a whole variety of reasons. And so on the first beer of our editor's picks for the best 20 beers in 2023, it's a beer out of Arizona Wilderness, a beer called Jitterbug Perfume. It is it's one of the most beautiful beers that we've seen all year, maybe the most beautiful beer that we've seen all year, packaged in a clear bottle, nominally a Saison style beer, but I wouldn't say that it's that Saison character that jumps out at you the most. It is a beet beer. It has this that kind of earthy but also fruity character. that comes out of that. It doesn't, it doesn't have that bitterness, but it has that gorgeous, beautiful color. And this beer also sums up what I really love about what American brewers in that kind of mixed culture and sour beer world are pushing towards today. And that is taking on the natural wine world head on and saying, hey, you can make funky wine, but listen, we've been making funky beer for a lot longer, and actually have processes that can produce beautifully drinkable things, beautifully drinkable beverages that engage in the same kind of consumption mode, the same kind of visually arresting color, but also have a more broad flavor profile to them. This Arizona Wilderness beer was just a revelation. Joe, you tasted it. All of our judges tasted it. It blew everybody away.
It was stunning. I mean, and if you had told me, at the beginning of the year, one of your best of the year is going to be a beet beer, I would have probably believed you, but it would have been skeptical. It was striking to look at, but even better to drink. That the way that tart citrus and the dryness, the oak, all just balanced beautifully.
I noted that when I went back in and drank another bottle of it, writing our mention for this story in the magazine. That kind of oaky edge to it that created this like vanilla-ish softness that helped kind of buffer some of that earthier beet character, as well as some of the citrus acidity that came with it. Just worked in this perfect kind of harmony to create this softness, but also this punch and also this beautiful balance, between bitterness, sweetness, acidity, citrus character. The balance was just absolutely perfect. This rated 100 with the blind judges of craft beer and brewing this year. A well-earned score, one of only a couple of beers that have scored 100 over the course of this past year. Absolutely beautiful, absolutely stunning, and a craft beer and brewing beer of the year. What's next on our list, Joe?
Out of San Antonio, Weathered Souls, Good Morning, Man. It's I'm sure, you can correct my pronunciation. My Jamaican's a little bit rusty. So this was
patois, which, by the way, may become the official language of Jamaica. I was really excited to see that Jamaica is taking steps to break away from the British Commonwealth, and part of that may be turning patois, Jamaican patois, into the official language of Jamaica, which I think is absolutely fantastic.
Well, this was a beer.
Nonetheless.
Anyway.
Good morning, man.
Yeah.
Good morning, man.
We just sound whiter and whiter the more we get in there. This is a beer that absolutely killed it at our editorial table. It was consensus pick. We all just knew when we tasted it. And we still didn't know yet, where it was from. I think that's important to keep pointing out. From the name, you might pick up there's a Jamaican theme. There's Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee going in there. There's a lot of other Marcus Baskerville's favorite other toys, cacao nibs and coconut and hazelnuts. Man, he loves to throw all the fun stuff into the stouts, and he knows what he's doing. He's been doing it for a long time, and it really works. Thick and leggy in the glass, like it's just fun to look at. There's a little suggestion of chili in there too. It is a sweet beer, but is deep. And I think that was something that we kept coming to in our discussion. And not for the first time. It's a theme we talk about sometimes. We talk about dessert stouts, these big imperial barrel-aged stouts. They're sweet. They're supposed to be sweet. But sweet is, if it's only sweet, you got a problem. There needs to be depth. And this had all the depth, and a lot of it's coming from that coffee. There's like a dark roast mocha cuppa thing going on there. Dark chocolate drizzle, like bonbons are coming in my head there, and then you still got those nice berry esters that I think that's a lot. Depth comes from there too. It gives you a suggestion of acidity, even if it's not there. Like in your brain, it kind of works, makes it so that it's giving it some perspective and dimension. Anyway, delicious beer. Congratulations to Marcus. I don't know. This was looking forward to drinking this one again sometime.
Couldn't agree with you more, Joe. I love that beer, and I think that the roast and the coffee is that perfect foil for some of the more indulgent characters in that. When we were tasting it in our best in beer tasting, just blew me away with the kind of balance that he found in that, despite all the intensity and flavor. All right, next up, we go to West Coast IPA, but it's an East Coast brewery out of New York City. Finback Headspace West Coast IPA, one of our top scoring West Coast IPAs from the IPA issue. And to be a top scoring West Coast IPA, literally beating out, 50, 80, other West Coast IPAs to hit this kind of scoring honor. I don't know the exact number. I'd have to go back and dig that up. But what a feat. The other crazy thing is that Headspace was not the only beer that was in consideration for Beers of the Year. Finback's Crispy Town West Coast Pilsner was also a top scorer this year in our lager issue. And as a result of that, we reached out to them after seeing that score that came through our blind panel. We did reach out to them and worked on a brewer's perspective, and they shared a homebrew recipe for Crispy Town. And just so that it's very clear to everybody, this is how our editorial process works. Our blind panel may review something. When we see something come through that strong through our blind review process, we obviously want to reach out to those brewers and build more content around that, because we know you are going to be interested in how they've gone about doing that. And so that's exactly what we did. Shared the recipe and their perspective on brewing Crispy Town, which, if you are a Craft Beer and Brewing subscriber, you have access to. So if you are not a Craft Beer and Brewing subscriber, what are you waiting for? Go subscribe. Anyway, that was Crispy Town, one of their 98 scoring West Coast Pilsner. But this beer that's on our top list, our best 20 beers of the year, is a West Coast IPA made by this New York City brewery. But it caught our blind review panel loved it. We noted notes of pink lemonade, peach, pomegranate, like a very subtle dankness, but just enough dankness right there to add this kind of depth and interest. It felt lean and light, but also like kind of playful. It showed that West Coast IPA doesn't have to be just an intense experience. It's not just about beating people over the head with it. It can be that. It can be unyielding and strong, but it can also just be light and playful and fruity, but also nicely balanced with all of these kind of spicy, dank, and other notes. The beautiful thing that we're seeing in West Coast IPA is both this, is this wonderful flavor, but also this kind of restraint. And I think that when we think about what our judges are responding to, finding that kind of balance. It's not simply about doing as much as you can anymore. It's figuring out how to do as much as you can and then pulling it back and paring it down to the essentials, and building beautiful drinkable beers that we can enjoy this hot flavor of beer after beer after beer. And that is exactly the space that Finback Headspace occupies. All right, Joe, after Finback, we go mixed culture.
We do. And you were talking about recipe in the magazine. I've got a recipe for this one in my back pocket, and I'm looking forward to sharing that really soon, particularly for our All Access subscribers. We send out All Access recipes, and this is going to be exclusive for our All Access subscribers. This is from now Santa Fe, formerly from Chicago, Keeping Together. And this was another consensus pick at our blind table. And it was, it's just a really beautiful beer. It's a very pretty beer. And it was fun to drink and fun to talk about. And it was a comforting beer too. And the thing with Avery Swanson, man, she is a really creative brewer. And she comes from a different starting point, I think, than a lot of other brewers. She's what I would call an expressionist. And I think that I knew some of these when I was in Belgium. Some people have, they just are, I don't know, right brain thinkers, or is it left brain? I get them mixed up. What she's trying to do is communicate a feeling or a memory and evoke that through her beer. And it sounds new agey, or what is this? It sounds like kind of, I don't know, if you haven't tasted them, it may sound a little bit fluffy, but then it works. And it's just because she's really good at what she does, and she knows how to turn this communication into flavors in a technical way. So we should probably talk about this particular beer. Thoughts Without a Thinker. It's got Earl Grey tea. It's got some citrus. It's a saison, a little bit of saffron, and I don't know what that does, but I mean, from a flavor standpoint, but it's cool.
Makes the beer very expensive to make.
Yeah. But it probably does something that's part of that overall picture. And it's just you get this like there's a mimosa like juiciness to this beer, but then it just like sparkles away into dry cobwebs. It's just so dry, and then you got to go back for more of that kind of juicy hit on there. It was really fun. There's this like white wine cellar floor Brettanomyces hit there that's really cool, and then the Earl Grey is like this just well the way Kate says it in her notes, I think is really nice. The Earl Grey is like a sweater that wraps up the rest of the beer. Orange hits first and washes swiftly away. The combination of the two is a very nostalgic moment of drinking tea after dinner in an armchair. I mean, that's hard to pull off as a brewer. Avery did it. Congratulations, Avery. Fantastic beer.
Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Beautiful beer. And, if you haven't listened to it yet, I had a great conversation with Avery down in Santa Fe a few months ago. Just got an incredible approach to making beer. And we are happy and excited that blindly our judges also responded just as positively to the very creative work that she's putting out there in the world. Next up on our list, we're going into Lagerland, Templin family out of Salt Lake City, Utah, Granary Keller beer. This one, if you are a subscriber to the magazine, know that it scored a 99 and was the top scoring German style Pilsner on our list this year. When we say Keller beer, it is only like nominally Keller in that sense. Not a very hazy beer, mostly clear from that regard, and probably doesn't have as much of that younger beer character as some people might expect out of something purely referred to as Keller beer. But this one was just stunning in the way that it embraces this character of malt and embraces this idea of fullness. Joe and I have lots of conversations, as we do with other brewers, about the kind of we should say the limitations of, or maybe the complete bankruptcy of the term crispy boy, and how this kind of reductive idea, this reductive term, while we are excited that it has made more people excited about lager in general, what we are less excited about is the idea that all lagers should embrace minimalism, that it is somehow only about being light and crisp, and that is somehow what lager should be. Anyone who spent enough time exploring the varying lager traditions of Europe knows that is absolutely not the case, that there are very few European brewers that would describe their beers as minimal. In fact, we heard it more often in the Czech Republic, those beers described as sweet and full. Within that kind of Franconia, Bamberg area, same kind of thing. You find brewers describing the kind of fruit and citrus characteristics, flavors within the hops that they use in those beers. Like these beers, lager beer. And maybe I'm making your point here, Joe. Maybe I should let you make this point. But lager beer, Helles, Pilsner, and others is as much about malt as it is about hops and these other characters. And, in terms of making lager, we shouldn't shy away from that kind of character in lager making.
I agree. I mean, yeah, like you said, that's an argument I've made, but I think there are different ways to get to the destination, right? And I think that crisp is not a meaningless word. It does mean something. For me, it's like a lightness and a structure and a quick finish. And there's implies some bitterness, but it is meaningful, and I think it's a cool thing to go for, particularly in hot climates. I'm here in Bangkok right now, and if Singha and Asahi weren't crisp, they wouldn't be nearly as refreshing. So there's a lot to be said for crisp, but that is not the only way to crack the nut, so to speak. There is some of the traditional lagers that are inspiring us. There really is body to it and malt character.
And right here in this Templin Granary Keller beer, those kind of bread dough notes, floral hops, light touch of lemon zest. It feels familiar. It feels comfortable. The beer can be different things to different people, but what captured us, and I think what really resonated with our blind judges the most, was this feeling of refinement. That while it could be these different experiences depending on what you're looking for in the beer, the hop flavor, the hop aroma, it exuded this fineness. It's a term that we hear often, from European lager brewers, like capturing that quality of fineness is important, and this beer, even if it is this kind of accessible, drinkable in 3s or 4s kind of, Pilsner beer, with a strong hop character, but a balanced hop character, like it is just something that it feels so elegant and so refined, and it can be that. Anyway, a beautiful beer, an absolutely stunning beer coming out of Salt Lake City, Utah. And that score of that beer in that issue was what got me to drive out there to Utah and go do a podcast with him, because naturally when I see these kinds of things come through, I just want to learn more. Congratulations to Templin for one of our beers of the year. Okay, Joe, next up.
Yeah, this one is fun because it really shouldn't be here, or it didn't need to be here, or I'm not sure how to put that, because you can win a gold medal at GABF, but that really has nothing to do with our editors' picks for this, our top 20. And this one won a gold just, the week before we sat down to do blind tasting. Not only that, but this beer,
Joe, you're doing an editor thing again. You're bearing the lead. You didn't even tell him what the beer is.
I'm getting there. It's a slow reveal. Be patient with me.
Oh man.
We're getting into the Midwest coast here. This is Fathead's Headhunter out of Ohio. They had just won a gold medal the week before. Now correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie. Did they submit this for IPA issue this year?
That they didn't submit it for IPA issue, but they did send us all of their beers for the Best in Beer issue.
Right.
And so out of consideration, and given that they had just won a gold medal, I was like, I'm going to slide this into our Best in Beer tasting and just see, if Joe and Stan and Kate and Patrick, maybe respond to it in a similar kind of way. And respond you did, blindly, of course. You didn't know that was what this beer was. And it was in a context with some pretty amazing, what I have implored every brewer not to do is to send us IPAs for the Best in Beer issue. My goodness, we taste enough IPAs during the IPA issue. I don't want to see any more of those from folks. But we did make space for a couple only for these good reasons, and this is one of those good reasons. And you all couldn't get enough of this one.
It was delicious, man. And I also, it's fun to think about where to categorize it. Maybe I should talk about how it tastes first. I mean, it's got that nice firm bitterness you expect from what we used to call American IPA. They're selling this now. I don't know if they always did this, but they're marketing as a West Coast style now, which people, we could have talked about this with the Finback beer too, I suppose, but like the regional designation can be baggage at times, particularly when the beer is not coming from the West Coast. In this case, people these days now, we know what it means. It communicates something. And I think, is it West Coast style? I don't know. Close enough. It's dry. It's bitter. It's got this really nice, like sun-kissed orange candy juiciness to it, lemon drop, candied citrus peel. So there's that sweetness there, but then it dries out into that nice, clean, bitter finish. It's just, man, it's fun to drink. It's just didn't put a foot wrong anywhere. A little bit of that resin lingers, just enough to like remind you what it's supposed to be. Anyway, yeah, it's a delicious beer. Congratulations, Fatheads. You guys are killing it this year. And, sometimes those GABF judges maybe know what they're talking about.
Absolutely. And, I've been emailing back and forth with Matt Cole, the brewmaster for Fatheads. Like, we're going to get a podcast going sometime here in the next few months and try to tap into understanding what the real secret is behind all of this Fatheads, magic, because it's not just IPA that they crush it in, German style wheat beer and others. They are consistently making some killer beers across some styles like that, a breadth of styles. So anyway, I want to learn more, and I need some excuse to go out to Cleveland, right? I mean, sounds like a great place to go in the wintertime. Anyway, we're going to move. The next beer on our top 20 beers of 2023 is a barley wine a barley wine of all things. I'm going to tell you about that in a second, but first, who doesn't love free samples? The Perfect Puree is offering a free sample box of their frozen fruit purees, concentrates, and blends to professional brewers. Picked at the peak of ripeness, their fruit is pureed and frozen for optimal fresh flavor and color. Explore classics from red raspberry and blood orange to unique fruit juice blends such as Yuzu Lux Sour. Choose from 40 plus flavors and build a free sample box at perfectpuree.com/beer. That's perfectpuree, PUREE.com/beer. Complimentary to professionals only. Also, this episode is brought to you by Yakima Chief Hops. The 7th annual Pink Boots blend is now available for pre-order. $3 of every pound of the Pink Boots blend purchased will be donated to the Pink Boots Society, a nonprofit organization that supports women and non-binary individuals in the fermented and alcoholic beverage industry through education. Place your orders from Yakima Chief Hops and secure your volume of this limited blend for your Pink Boots collaboration brew day on March 8th, International Women's Day. Learn more at www.yakimachief.com/pink-boots-blend. A great cause and a great company. So get out there, support. All right, let's talk about barley wine next. Next up, New Image 9505. You know, this one is one that our blind reviewers reviewed last fall in our Pale Ale and Other Things issue, and they scored it a 99. Right around the same time, I noticed that it won I think it was a silver medal from FOBAB, Festival of Barrel-Aged Beers, in that kind of barley wine category. Clearly crushing it last year in this kind of category. So our judges gave this beer a 99. Let me tell a little story about it. They released the first batch of 9505, and that was the one that they entered last year in FOBAB and also sent to us, that our judges judged for that issue. When it came time this year, obviously as a top scorer with a score of 99, it was automatically in contention. And so I asked them to send us some 9505. We want to revisit it. Well, the beer they sent us was actually batch 2 of 9505, where the only difference was that it sat in casks for like another 9 months or something. It was the same exact original brew. They had just debarreled the first part, bottled it, released it as batch 1, and batch 2, they just left it in casks, left it in bourbon cask, and then pulled it back out. 9 months later, bottled that, and that was what we tasted the second time around. I don't know that I've ever tasted age that has improved a beer that much, improved a really phenomenal beer that much. We started with our baseline from the original batch of 99 because it was an incredible beer. It was absolutely stunning. Kind of captured these almost Amburana, style character, like vanilla notes, cinnamon, allspice, definitely some chocolatey notes. It's on the darker side of that barley wine spectrum, has this kind of richness without falling into kind of stout territory. It was very much about this kind of spicy flavor with this just beautiful, rich bourbon, whiskey, spirits character. Stan described it as dark fruits, toffee, dark chocolate, and sherry. But it is so well integrated. It is so cohesive, that even picking out these individual flavors doesn't really do it justice. There is it was a bit boozy. I mean, this is a big beer, of course, but in this case, that booze worked to support the kind of weight and heft of the flavor, those oaky bourbon notes. It kind of makes sense within that kind of context. You don't think that a beer that's rated a 99 could really go anyplace. There's not a lot of room to go. This is one of those beers that made me wish that we had more points, because it didn't even feel like 99, as Stan said, 99 is too low. I would think that if that was our judging standard, that even maybe 100 might be a little too low for this beer. I don't know that I can exaggerate when I say I think this was my personal favorite beer this year, the beer that stood out to me the most, and maybe even of the last 5 years. It was so singular and so interesting, but also so refined, that I can't stop thinking about it, and it really did hit me in that kind of singular way. So I don't know. You tasted it, Joe. How'd you feel about it?
Well, I mean, we all loved it. I think that one of the things I keep thinking about with the barley wines is the discussion we kept having was beer flavors. We were looking for beer flavors. That sounds really oversimplified and dumb, but in the context of, I think in recent years, barley wines have kind of gotten, in the way that imperial stouts have too, kind of chasing these higher finishing gravities, so they get thicker and sweeter, and that can work, but you need that depth. And I think this was a more balanced example with all of the depth you could possibly ask for, all of the dark fruit esters playing in with all the many, many layers of caramel, and it tasted like a barley wine. And there's whatever it is your like idea in the back of your head of what a barley wine is, it's just like triggered all those things, and then there was more to explore, and that was super fun to taste.
For our next beer on this list, we actually flipped back into mixed fermentation again. This one may be a little more of a beer that we might call a wild ale or a sour beer. Joe, talk to us about the next beer on the list.
I'm going to give you the lead up front this time. This is from Nashville, Southern Grist, and it's their gin barrel aged version of Perpetual Composition. Perpetual Composition is a Solera style mixed culture beer. So they pull some out, put some back in, and they do different things with it. And gin barrels, I don't know. I've been really excited by what's been going on with mixed culture beers and gin barrels lately. Last year in our top 20, we had the Sapwood Cellars neologism here. And it was just the way that the botanicals can work with, working with yeast and Brettanomyces and bacteria to suggest citrus without often there being any citrus in there. And it's sort of I'm, old enough to remember some really dodgy gin barrel beers from back in the day. And you got the worst of the gin and none of the fun. And I feel like maybe brewers are really, of course, these are the cream of the crop, but maybe y'all are getting the hang of this.
No, I think you're right, Joe. I think that there is a direct correlation here, and that amongst some of our favorite beers in this kind of spectrum, that gin barrel aging has a tremendously positive effect. And, obviously when it's not handled well, it's not a great beer and it doesn't make the list. But when you're talking about a great beer, and I should say that this Southern Grist Perpetual Composition is a great beer. The other expression that they sent to us, for blind review, scored a 95, the Blueberry Perpetual Composition. And, and so from here, the Blueberry, scored a 95, the Gin Barrel Age scored a 99. A tremendous, obviously they're starting from this tremendous base, but it's this Gin Barrel expression that just put this specific one just over the top.
So a little bit about this beer. It's spent 9 months in a Bordeaux foeder and then 8 more in the gin casks. And how all that squares with the Solera thing, I don't know. I'm interested as someone who writes about brewing, as a taster, don't care. It's delicious. And then you get this just like really bright, classy lemon floral on the nose. You get a little bit of the juniper, mint, and berries we were getting. And then the acidity is just nicely judged. It's gently tart. I was getting a little bit of seaside there, a little saline whiff. I don't know what that, maybe if that's from the Brett or from the gin, or I have no idea. But there's just like this minty juniper stripe that runs through it that's really, really nice all the way through, like that gentle acidity, dry finish. As elaborately as this beer was made using big flavored components, it's so elegant and just like delicate and really fun to drink, and it just works beautifully. And I'm sure we're going to see now more brewers out there making mixed culture beers, putting them in gin barrels, and then what do? You just print money after that, right? Sales success guaranteed.
If someone's trying to appeal to cocktail drinkers, this is a fantastic way to do it with a beer, with beautiful breadth and character. Nonetheless, let's talk about the next beer on the list. BKS Pivo Project out of Kansas City, Missouri. Bohemian Style Pilsner. This is another one that rated a 99 in our lager issue with our blind reviewers in that kind of Czech pale lager category. This is one now, Joe and I came back from Czechia, and I don't know about you, Joe, but I became a complete asshole about all of this stuff.
I've always been that way, Jamie. I was already like that, so welcome.
All right, so I joined this club with Joe where we're complete assholes about this. Where you feel like you have to lecture everybody on what an actual Czech lager is, which for American brewers, let me just say this, it's not just using Czech ingredients. That's your first step. But if you're going to make a Czech style pale lager and you want to make it actually Czech style and not just Czech ingredients, make it like the Czechs do. You got to double decoct it. You've got to, build this kind of fullness into it. You have to, have this kind of malt heft that supports this intense hop character, because that's how the Czechs do it. It's got to be drinkable. It's got to have this pitelnost. It needs to, you need to be able to drink, 7, 8, 9 of them in a sitting. And so the balance has to be absolutely spot on there. But they're also not, they're not meant to be minimal either. And so we see a lot of minimal expressions of Czech lager, and thankfully our judges have can sniff those out. And this beer is not one of those. It captured the kind of heft, the kind of malt heft, that the thing that the Czech brewers might describe as sweetness. But it's really this kind of fullness in the body that gets captured through that double decoction process that also offsets some of the dryness. It has both of those things, which I think becomes this interesting balance and this interesting kind of tension in Czech pale lager, that it is both dry and it has this feeling of fullness, of sweetness. And so, but the key to it is the time, right? It needs to start with that feeling of fullness and sweetness, and it needs to finish dry. If it finishes sweet and full, then you're not doing something right, and you don't want to take another sip, and you don't want to finish that glass. And the key to Czech style pale lager is finishing the glass, and then finishing the next glass, then finishing the glass after that, and then finishing the next 2 or 3 glasses after those, because that's how Czech pale lager is consumed. And so if your beer can't do that, then it's functionally not doing it the right way. Anyway, BKS, Artisanales in Kansas City, Brian and Mary have done a phenomenal job, of embracing that kind of tension in this beer, producing this kind of prized drinkability, handling the strong hop loads and the kind of the fullness in the body, and still maintaining this drinkability to the whole beer. And they've done it as American brewers approaching this kind of Czech style. They've done it in an absolutely beautiful way.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and plug an article here too that we just posted on Monday, and you don't even need to be a subscriber to read this now. It's online for everybody. But my Czech lager brewing deep dive that we did for our lager issue in the summer is now on the website, The Art of the Addictive. And the idea is, if you want to brew a more authentic Czech lager, here's what the brewers tell us. We talk to a lot of brewers. Why do you do it this way? How do you do it? And just get as many details as we can. And then also think about what we're tasting and try to connect all the dots. But also, if you just want to brew that kind of beer that you end up selling more of or drinking more of, because you just have to have another one. There's little, that's their game. That's their whole thing. They're trying to outdo each other in that game. And it's, for us, the drinkers, it works out beautifully. So article, wallow in it. It's there.
Also, demand more foam. Okay.
Hey.
That's all I'm going to say on that one. Joe, next up, completely different beer. We're going off in a whole nother direction. And I think, we should probably blame Stan for this one, because Stan has become the biggest advocate that we have found for pastry stouts. It is the most unlikely thing. But if we find someone advocating within our discussions about beers of the year, when we find someone advocating for pastry stouts, 9 times out of 10, Stan Hieronymus. Who would have thought?
Yeah, Pastry Stan. That's what we call him now. So this beer is from North Richland Hills, Texas. I believe that's Arlington area, Dallas. Or no, Dallas Fort Worth.
Dallas
Fort Worth. And it's False Idol, Ralphie Runs Wild. The story of the name had to be explained to us by Patrick Dawson. It's a reference to the Buffalo at Colorado games, I guess. That's Ralphie. And he runs.
Joe, you're not paying attention to Coach Prime? Come on, man. Deion Sanders.
Right.
Prime time. Denver, or the Boulder CU Buffs, man. Like, no. The Buffalo is their mascot, and apparently someone who has a relationship with the brewery, has a love of CU. Anyway, They named this beer for Ralphie the Buffalo.
Because aged in Stranahan's whiskey barrels, Colorado whiskey. There's the connection. There's the Colorado connection.
I will say, as a Fort Collins resident, the home of CSU, Colorado State, the Rams, a big intrastate rival with the Buffaloes down in Boulder. You can tell that we have a editorial integrity in this choice by allowing this to kind of pass. I shouldn't say I don't care about the Rams. They're here. I have no connection to the university. But anyway, I'd like to pretend that there's been no bias against our neighbors in Boulder over this beer.
Yeah. Well, we can keep talking football. We're both SEC guys now, but I'm just going to move on here. Let's talk about vanilla, because that is really the element that I think, well, let's say it grabbed Stan's attention first. He wrote in his notes, need to learn more about vanilla. And so if I'm a little concerned, because if our hops insider becomes a vanilla insider, it's really going to change the dimension of our coverage in the brewing industry guide. But when Stan wants to go down a rabbit hole, you let him go and you see where it's going to take you. If that happens, we can blame these guys at False Idol. Anyway, this beer, delicious, thick, leggy, black as hell, of course. But when you put your nose in there, then you're getting into the vanilla experience. And I think in beer broadly, as an ingredient, vanilla can be overdone. We all know that. It can also be really simple. But there is so much complexity also possible with vanilla, and so much depth that's possible when it's done the right way and in balance. This vanilla happens to be Ugandan for you vanilla heads out there. But we were getting like cherry cordial, dark fruit compote notes from the esters too. For me, it was like, we used to eat mincemeat pie at Christmas every year. I was getting the mincemeat pie thing, like lots of just stewed raisins and spice, and just, man, it was just deep. Dark chocolate, of course, more vanilla, whiskey spice, and the way those things all work together is beautiful. Really big flavors, sweet but deep and beautifully integrated. It was thick, warm, mitigated by this big marshmallowy body. I really enjoy how body can mitigate sweetness. Like it's, and I got into an argument about this at the judging table at GABF actually, because somebody was suggesting that a high finishing gravity meant the beer is sweet. And I was like, well, yeah, but also that's body, and then body can change how you perceive sweetness. To me, it stretches it out sometimes instead of it being, sharp and cloying. Anyway, that's another aside. But I mean, for all the fun and like childlike holiday flavors going on there, there's the warmth of the whiskey and there's the barrel tannin, and it's like, yeah, okay, there's still some grown up here, and I love that balance and going back and forth there. Really delicious beer. Like, congratulations, False Idol. Thank you for sending that one.
Absolutely. Next up on our list, Hazy IPA, cross-strain Fairy Nectar, double dry hopped Fairy Nectar. This one, through the course of our IPA issue earlier this year, was our top scoring Hazy IPA, pulled in a score of 98. The Palmares are there, the Bonafides, like, it has a pedigree here that's well respected. Our judges, when they are tasting things blind, don't give a shit about that. They have no idea what they're tasting. They have no idea what a beer has accomplished in the past. And through that process, they gave this beer a score of 98. As I've gone back into it again recently and been tasting it again, actually I had a can before we started the podcast earlier tonight. I think what our judges respond to and what I have responded to most about this is, the kind of balance that this is not this hazy IPA is certainly not one of the most murky, turbid, and sweetest, but really captures this softness. The softness of fruit flavor, some of these, stone fruit notes, and as well as these tropical guava and mango notes. But the way that it balances these, the way that it approaches them with a subtlety, rather than an intensity, feels accomplished. It also feels drinkable. This is a hazy IPA, double dry hopped hazy IPA that I could drink 3 or 4 of in a sitting and not grow tired of it. That, it doesn't have that intense fatigue factor because the goal is not just to beat you over the head with that most hop intensity that it can find. It's just, there's a beauty to it and also a drinkability to it that I think our judges responded to. Nice to see that within this kind of blind judging context. It's easier in a blind judging context to celebrate those things that grasp onto the highest intensity, that become those like slight outliers that that kind of rise to the top because they shout the loudest. This is not a beer that shouts the loudest. This is a beer that pulls it together in the most beautiful and most cohesive of ways, and for that, it has earned its spot on our top 20 beers of 2023. Next up, Joe, we go a little bit dark.
Yeah, we're going to San Francisco. This one has a little story attached. I'll try to keep it short. There is actually another way for editors' picks, our best of the year, to happen. And one of those is that throughout the year, we just experience a great beer and we remember it later in the year when we're looking back. I look back, I try to keep notes as much as I can without being antisocial at times. And I look back at my notes and see like what really killed it for me during the year. And this was one of those beers that killed it for me. So I reached out to Nick Mamir at Bartlett Hall Brewing. And I said, man, I loved that Powell Street Porter. When I was in there, I just was walking all over San Francisco, tired feet, needed to sit somewhere. Hey, that looks like a bar. So my wife, Kelly, and I went in, sat down, ordered a beer. It's like, oh, I think they won a couple medals. We heard of these guys. And had a porter, and it was just, damn, this is really good. And started taking notes on it. I was like, this is when I have to be antisocial, honey. I got to take some notes. And then, come back to it later in the year. And yeah, Nick sent us some beer, said we put it in front of the table. And what do you know? I mean, I didn't really know it was, I can ask him to send it in. I don't always know if it makes it or if it's there. So I didn't know what this was. We didn't know what this was. But again, it was a hit at the table because it's a great beer. Bartlett Hall Powell Street Porter. That was maybe that was a longer story than it needed to be, but we're at 6.4% ABV. This is not a big barrel-aged monster. It's old school, kind of robust American porter. The balance on it is lovely. It's got the body. It's you get that mid-range caramel and the berry esters for depth there. You do get that little bit of roasty espresso, and I think you want it there. It should be there. It's obviously easily overdone at times, and here it is just like hits the note perfectly. It's bitter, it's sweetish, it's roasty, finishes dry, really beautifully integrated, woven together. It's just a really fun beer to drink, and it's one that you finish a pint and you're like, I'm gonna want another one of those. And for a 6.4% porter, that's not easy to do. So congratulations, Nick, great beer. If you guys get to San Francisco, get out to Bartlett Hall and try some beers, man. Nick knows what he's doing over there.
Next up on our list, West Coast Pilsner. Joe, is West Coast Pilsner a style? Is it real?
Yeah. I mean, if enough people say it is, then I guess it starts to become a thing, right? I mean, we've done podcasts on it that have done really well. Obviously, we've written about it. We publish recipes called West Coast Pils. So, but I like, personally, I'm just interested in hop forward lager of all kinds. And, dry hop lager's a thing. So where are the hops coming from? If they come from Pacific Northwest, maybe that's a West Coast Pils.
West Coast Pils, Italian style Pils, French style Pils, Polish Pils, New England pills. I don't know. I don't care what it is. We're here for it. Send us your pills and send it with all of the creative hop expressions that you can imagine. And if they work well, then hey, let's talk about it, because we are both here for any beers in this high fours, low fives, percentage range that capture this kind of flavor and do it with this kind of drinkability. I think that's what our judges loved about 12 West Radial Spines, one of our 20 beers, best beers of this year, and also a top score in our lager issue. New Zealand pills. I guess we could also call it New Zealand pills. I mean, since we're going to try to, slice and dice these styles to, like infinitely small subcategories. I like the idea of calling it cold pale ale because that's also what it is. And, I mean, if we can just trigger people like that, then we might as well trigger people like that too. 12 West, they've been sending us beer for the last couple of years. Super impressed with this brewery down in, the greater Phoenix area, Gilbert, Arizona has done. They're playing across the field, but this beer, I think, captured this beautiful West Coast hop character and did it within this kind of Pilsner milieu, this kind of, nominally Pilsner idea. I keep using the word nominally, but I just love it so much. I just can't stop. Nonetheless, Radial Spines, 5% ABV, tons of hop character, but also this beautiful drinkability that comes from this lager fermentation that just allows them to focus so intently on the hops. It's not estery. It's really just about all of that hop character, those kind of classic orange zest, tropical floral. But that range, the beautiful part of it is that they keep it. It's not loud. It's not trying to, to drown you out with this like high volume intensity. They keep it down at a measurable range. And, because of that, the beer doesn't become fatiguing. You get to experience all the beauty of these hops in just this kind of perfectly, perfect tone and perfect volume level, to appreciate them without having to, to be deafened by them. Beautiful beer. Love what they're doing. Thank you to Gully at 12 West. After we decided to add this to our list, we very cagily said, "Hey, would you be up for for sharing a recipe for this beer with us?" Without telling him that they had won a beer of the year. He might have had an idea, Joe. I don't know if he did or not. He might have had some idea of what we were asking him about, but he played along with us nonetheless. Definitely subscribe to the magazine, beerandbrewing.com. Click on that subscribe button, become a subscriber, and make your own version of 12 West's Radial Spines. Compare it to the original. Buy a 6-pack, buy a case of it, and compare your own. And tell us what you think about West Coast Pilsner. Joe, what's next on this? Another lager.
Yeah, so we're gonna be talking a little bit about Winston-Salem here for a couple times in this episode, and I don't want to give away too much. Maybe this is gonna. It's
funny.
Go ahead.
It's funny you say that because like Winston-Salem shows up twice in this list. Gilbert, Arizona shows up twice in this list. The Bay Area shows up twice in this. There are
Kansas
City shows up twice in this list. 10 of our beers of the year come from 5 cities or metro areas. And there's a strange focus to that this year. Sorry for interrupting you. This one in particular is from Winston-Salem.
Yeah, well, the theme that we're seeing anyway out of the beers that are scoring really well with us and also winning medals too at times is dark beers out of Winston-Salem. And so I'm super, I don't know if that's coincidence. Maybe next year they win for pale ales or something else. But it's just interesting to me that, anyway, this is from Wise Man in Winston-Salem. It's living a double life because it's a Doppelbock. And that's fun. And we're getting into more lager here too. It's a big Doppelbock at 8.5%. So it's a bruiser, but it's a drinkable one. And a Doppelbock has to be if you're gonna do a German lager and call it that, then I think you owe the tradition a certain attenuation. You got to get it balanced enough. You got to get it fermented out enough that it's dangerous for its strength, whatever that strength is. So, but here you got all the malt depth too. It's really wonderful. None of it's overdone. The way I describe it is like classical guitar complexity at easy listening volume. Nothing's hitting you over the head, but there's so much there to appreciate. Stewed plums, toasted muffin, dried oak leaves. I mean, sure. Like it's really fun beer. You can dial in like that and pick things apart. Or again, holidays are coming up. You could just drink a beer like this and get loose with friends, and it would be really fun. So anyway, great beer. We're gonna say more about Winston-Salem soon here, but congrats to Wise Man, and we got to get down there, Jamie, to Winston-Salem and figure out what's going on there with the dark malt.
Next up on our list, not Winston-Salem, but this is the other duo of towns or cities, whatnot, that I had just blanked on. KCBC, Brooklyn, New York. Brooklyn, New York had two beers of the year this year. This one is KCBC, Kings County Brewers Collective. Welcome to the underworld. Helles, another top scorer from our lager issue, as rated by 99, I believe, by the blind judges of craft beer and brewing. New York City has hit a beer renaissance, a brewing renaissance. KCBC in Bushwick doing killer work, really creative work, doing it with fun, artsy, edgy mentality to what they do, at least within the packaging and within the way that they're presenting the brand. But the beautiful thing about the beer itself is that it, again, eschews this kind of minimalist vibe. It embraces that idea of malt. It is full, it's hopped, but it's not bitter like a Pilsner. But there was just this overwhelming freshness in the flavor. It kept striking us as fresh malt. There was something light and clean, full, but also not heavy, and it made it feel like it was substantial without it being like having a lot of weight to it. And, that is just the coolest experience for a Helles that one could ask for, where it is both simultaneously satisfying and also easy to drink. What's up next, Joe?
Yeah, so we'll go back to Kansas City for this next one. It's KC Beer Light. And I think, okay, so we had, we mentioned Cross Strain because they were in this space 2 years ago, I believe, with their Saison. And that's impressive to do that with a Saison and a hazy IPA too. And KC Beer is here. I think they were here a few years ago for the Helles, I'm pretty sure, the Helles Lager. So this is a German-style light beer, 3.5% alcohol. And it did well with the blind review panel earlier this year. It scored a 95, but that was being judged along with a bunch of kind of bigger German-style Pilsners too. So that score stood out to us as something like a 95 for a beer of 3.5% alcohol is really exceptional, actually. So then Jamie threw it to our editorial blind tasting, and it was just one of those things where like we all could see like, yes, I mean, you could set your watch to this beer. It is precise. It is super light, but for that lightness, it has a lot of flavor. A lot of that structure is coming from a really nicely judged bitterness. It is kind of bitter, and that it's not overly bitter. And with this kind of lightness of frame, you really can't get away with a whole lot. But it tastes bitter, and it's in a way that makes you want to kind of keep hitting it. There is a really feather light sweetness to it, but it's just super clean. A lot of flavor for 3.5% alcohol. Really impressive beer. It was one of those where we're just like, yeah, this is great. Like, this is really well made. We could drink a lot of it. Where's the argument? Where's the problem? There is no problem with the beer. We didn't really couldn't fault it. I think we also liked the idea of having a light beer on the list. To be honest, but it belongs here. It was a well-made beer. I think KC Beer is an interesting brewery too, where they're making fantastic, reverent German-style lagers. They're a powerhouse in the region. Or they're a force in the region, at least, for craft beer. But I think they don't get, sometimes people don't talk about KC Beer as much as they talk about Live Oak or Dovetail or Notch among the people who really appreciate kind of traditional approaches to craft lager in the States. But KC Beer ought to be right up there, in my opinion. Great beer. Again, congrats to KC Beer and that team there.
Up next is not a lager. Up next is a first for Craft Beer and Brewing's editors' picks for best beers of the year. It's a non-alcoholic beer. And this one, actually, I mean, we spent some time debating this one. Number one, because it was the lowest score from our blind panel of any beer on this list. It scored this beer, Two Roads non-alcoholic juicy IPA, scored a 91 with our blind judges, which speaks to something more interesting. When we tasted non-alcoholic beers back for that first issue of this cycle, we tasted a lot of, let me just be perfectly honest with you, a lot of terrible beers, about things that people should not have called beer, about things that were basically hard seltzer with extract beer flavoring. And it was the same kind of scenario as when we first tasted gluten-free beers years and years ago. There was one standout, and there were a lot of attempts that didn't really meet the standard that we would have liked for beer. Of course, in that gluten-free category, the competition has improved immeasurably. And today's gluten-free beers are really excellent. And the top of that category are very compelling beers, gluten-free or not. What we're starting to see is now in this non-alcoholic category, the same thing is starting to be possible, where we have started to find brewers like Phil Markowski at Two Roads who are finding ways to make beer in this non-alcoholic space that is every bit as compelling as beer with alcohol. And, at some level, that should be celebrated. It was great to see the same beer that our blind judges gave their highest rating, in this issue last year. Most recently also won a silver medal in the non-alcoholic category from JBF. Also really cool to see. It's kind of awesome and cool to see Phil Markowski, a guy that most people probably know as writing the Farmhouse Ales book, who has constantly been pushing innovation at Two Roads in all of these things. Like it, I will note that their hard seltzer, H2 Roads, was our highest rated seltzer a few years ago when we put those in front of our blind judges. That this guy, who has made some of the most traditional approaches to traditional farmhouse wild and sour beers, is also just a phenomenal leader in this kind of spectrum of innovation, but also finding ways to make all of these innovative beer styles and related things taste good. Because that's ultimately where it all comes back to. If these things don't taste good, then what's the point? If it doesn't feel like this is a legitimate, something I can legitimately enjoy in lieu of a beer, then it hasn't succeeded. And I will say this, and the reason that this beer is on our list this year, this is the first non-alcoholic beer that we have tasted where we have felt that we can enjoy this as a beer and not feel like we are sacrificing beer in the pursuit of some other goal.
Well said. Yeah. It's exciting to see what's going on with non-alcoholic beer now. Just getting better and better all the time.
The next beer on our list, however, has plenty of alcohol in it, Joe, and plenty of malt. This is another one from Winston-Salem.
Yeah. We're going to Incendiary, and man, these guys are having a good year. They won 2 golds at World Beer Cup this year. One for their Schwarzbier and also for their brown porter. And this is where I'm going to mention that in this particular issue, in our Ask the Pros section toward the front of the magazine, we have a sort of a brewer's perspective and a recipe on how they put together their brown porter, written by Josh Weichert. So we got the recipe there. You can get into that. We have already published the recipe for this one, Incendiary Schwarzbier. We had that in our lager issue this summer on how to brew a gold medal Schwarzbier. So, and here it is. I mean, it was kind of a no doubter for this list too. It scored a 99 with the review panel. We loved it. It's a great beer. Again, dark malt, Winston-Salem. What's going on? I don't know. It's interesting. Go find out. Maybe there's something in the water. I think that I mentioned this with the Doppelbock too, but if you're gonna call it a Schwarzbier, that implies a German sensibility toward drinkability. So it's got to be drinkable. It's got to be balanced. It can't stick out too far in any direction. And this is just really nicely put together. It's got that color you're looking for, just those like red highlights. Like a Schwarzbier really isn't black. It's just not quite black. And this looks exactly like it's supposed to look, for whatever that's worth. We don't care. We want to drink it. You get like a cold brew coffee smoothness to it. It's lightly sweet, but it's not sweet in any real way. You've got just this agility to the beer, the way it's going between these soft notes of chocolate, dark caramel, suggesting sweetness, but it never gets sweet. And a little bit of light roast. It's just balanced, restrained, gently bitter, finishes dry enough. It's light, it's clean. It's just a really delicious beer. It's well made. And we've got, if you look on our website, Gold Medal Schwarzbier, you can search it up, and you've got this was a recipe from their quality control manager, Adam Goetz. I'm saying that the right German way. I don't know how his family says it. Our family has been mispronouncing our German name for a few generations now. So, but it's a beer that you can kill just as many pints of as you could a Pils or a Helles, but it's a striking, dark in the glass, and nice job putting it together, incendiary. And again, we got to get to Winston-Salem and figure out what's going on there.
Coming up next, from the Bay Area, Oakland, California, right across the bay from your friends at Bartlett Hall, Ghost Town, Nose Goblin, Double IPA, West Coast Double IPA. This beer really doesn't need any introduction. Gold medals in 2021 and 2022 at the Great American Beer Festival. Just a tremendous accomplishment in a very tough category. There's a few things I think that are feeding Ghost Town, and it's not just Ghost Town. There is this incredible high performance culture in the East Bay in particular, between Cellar Maker, Wondrous, Original Pattern, like a bunch of really killer beer makers. So to come out with a beer like Nose Goblin and be so successful with it, and to make a splash with it within this context is hard. There is so much great beer being made within an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours of where Ghost Town is. And so figuring out how to make something that's going to rise above, this incredible level of high quality.
I love this beer. It's super fun to drink. It's exciting to see the sort of, resurgence of West Coast style we were talking about. I don't know if this is that. I think it is. Officially is. It's West Coast, like geographically. I think that there's a softness, the right word? There's a slight softness to the Ghost Town beers that I enjoy. They're not really hard edges. I kind of, maybe sometimes, I like bitterness. Maybe I want it to feel more bitter than it is. But you still like keep going back for more and more. And I got to go to the Ghost Town taproom actually this past summer too. And that was really, or one of them, and I knew what I wanted, like I'm in there and I'm like thinking I should probably try a few others, but damn, I know that one's going to be good. So I had to have a Nose Goblin.
Rip my face off.
Great. Yeah. Really fun.
Crush my soul. No, exactly. There's something I think, to the way that they select hops where when you say no rough edges, I agree with you, but I think there's still like, there's a spark to it. I still haven't gotten to the complete bottom of what that is, but nonetheless, Ghost Town Nose Goblin deserves its spot here, and we are humongous fans of the way that they brew.
It's also, we got an all-access recipe for this on the website too, so look it up. Ghost Town Nose Goblin.
And so our last and final beer, Joe, our final beer, the 20th on our list of 20 best beers of 2023, is a barley wine that earned its spot on this list through our best in beer tasting.
Yeah, this is from Norfolk, Virginia. This is Benchtop's Old Wooden Ship. And I think I may have already used the phrase platonic ideal earlier this episode already, talking about barley wine. And I think for judges, it's a bit of a cliche, right? To look for the platonic ideal of a particular style. But it's interesting to think about what is it when we think of any particular style, but in this case, barley wine.
Have we not moved past this stupid metaphor of the cave and the idea that that any of this shit actually exists? Come on, aren't we? I mean, in terms of aesthetic critique Aren't we well past that at this point? Can we just put the Platonic ideal to bed?
Well, it's going to get more into more like a semantic explanation of it, because our idea of what a barley wine is, or what anything is based on all of our experience with that thing, right? So all the barley wines we've ever tasted, in our lives, add up to something in our minds, and particularly the good ones that you remember. And then, of course, along the way, you absorb some style guidelines, maybe, and maybe you try to brew it sometimes at home or in professional capacity. You develop this idea of what it's supposed to be, and then sometimes you drink something and it's like, it lights up all those little centers of your brain that like, barley wine alert, burp, burp. It's just like, this tasted, I guess, like you want one to taste. And again, the beer flavors thing was coming up with Stan and I. Let's talk about this beer. A Year in Heaven Hill bourbon barrels. But it's not a bourbon heavy barley wine. It's like the bourbon and the barrel are adding these beautiful accents to malt. And it was really fun to get lost in that. It's like the bourbon and the barrels there are like pulling strings and having influences and helping determine outcomes, but they're not, they're behind the curtain. It's interesting how that works. I love it when that's done well. And then you've got, deep caramel depth, big caramel nose on it with like figs soaked in brandy or something, poached pears, milk chocolate, herbal hops, and then a little kiss of whiskey there. And I'm still talking about the aroma. I mean, so there's a lot to do there. And then on the tongue, it's like, it's big on the palate. It's sweet. Again, another one of those, it's like, it's sweet, but it's deep. There's a lot here to explore. You got some burnt sugar, that deep toffee, dark fruit. It's just, and then of course, a little bit of barrel too is there, and that little sherry oxidation you're looking for there is too. That just also signals like barley wine, and it's like, as good as this was, this was unquestionably one of the best beers that we tasted, even among these 20. I still think it would be better after a year in the cellar, and it was just really fantastic beer. Old Wooden Ship. It's a cool name too, right? It sounds like a barley wine. Old Wooden Ship.
And that brings to a close our editor's picks for best beers of 2023. Next up on this Best in Beer episode is our reader's picks for favorite beer styles. And this is going to wrap up this episode. Interestingly enough, we have loved asking this question of our readers year after year to also see how things change. And this year, things have changed. Things have changed, not at the very top, but the number 2 spot. We had 2 beer styles trade places this year, and it is very interesting to see. We're going to go through this. We asked you what your favorite beer style was. At the bottom of the list, but still in double digits, right at about 12%, 11.8% of respondents mentioned that one of their favorite beer styles was smoked ale or lager. Right above that, at 13.9%, barley wine. At 14% of respondents, fruited sour, that's a quick or kettle soured fruited sour. 14.3% of respondents mentioned that Hefeweizen or wheat beer was one of their favorite styles. 15% of respondents mentioned that brown ale was one of their favorite styles. And of course, these are not exclusive. We didn't make people pick one. We just said, list all, your favorite styles. 16.4% of respondents mentioned that Abbey styles, double, triple, and quad, were some of their favorite styles. Just a hair above that, at 16.5%. Amber and red ales were those favorites. At 17.2%, English style ales were right above that. At 17.3%, just squeaking out ahead of it, wild, spontaneous, and mixed culture ales. At 17.9%, porter right above that. And then, of course, neck and neck with stouts under 7.5% ABV at 18.4%. Vienna Lager right above that, 22.8% of respondents listed that as a favorite. Imperial Stout came down a few spots here. 26.3% of respondents listed Imperial Stout as one of their favorite styles. Definitely off of its high over the last few years. Saison, however, still coming in strong there. 27.9% of respondents listing Saison as one of their favorite styles. Helles, right above that, 31.9% of respondents listing Helles among their favorite styles. Pale Ale in the number 4 spot, 42.5% of respondents listing Pale Ale as one of their favorite styles. In the number 3 spot, and this one was number 2 last year, 44.5% of respondents listed Hazy IPA as one of their favorite styles. What was it that unseated Hazy IPA for the number 2 spot? Yes, you guessed it correctly. Pilsner, 52.9% of our survey respondents listed Pilsner as their number 2, or as their one of their favorite styles. Enough people that have put it in the number 2 spot on our readers list of favorite styles to brew or drink. And in the number 1 spot, once again, in the same spot that it's been, I believe, since we started asking this question, 60.1% of respondents to the readers survey listed IPA, American or West Coast IPA, as one of their favorite styles to brew or drink. Joe, what do you think about Pilsner taking the number 2 spot away from Hazy IPA?
I think that's encouraging, and it means that, I also still like seeing Saison up there pretty high too, and Pale Ale is up high. I mean, I think it's a good reminder actually that our readers are mostly brewers, and so some of these are brewers' beers. Maybe we hear a lot about Pale Ale and Saison not selling well, in some cases, or not if you call them that, but brewers still want to drink them. And most of y'all listening and voting are brewers. And so it's to see a Pilsner at number 2 in that context makes a ton of sense to me. And I love to see it.
I'm here for it too. Thank you all for your thoughtful, nuanced voting in our reader survey. We appreciate all of you all for sharing your time with us, sharing your thoughts as readers as to what the best breweries, best beer styles, best beer cities, best places to drink beer, all of those things are this year. Please, if you're not, sign up for our email newsletter. That is the place where next September you will receive notification of our voting, a reader survey voting going live. Again, those members of our email newsletter get first notification about that. So even if you're not a subscriber, and of course, if you're not a subscriber, why are you not a subscriber? You should be a subscriber. There's plenty of great content within craft beer and brewing that if you've cared to listen to this point through the podcast, you're going to care even more about reading that. So spend a few bucks, support us, support media, and vote with your dollars for what you care about. Become a subscriber, become a supporter of craft beer and brewing, and let us know what content really matters to you. But also become a newsletter subscriber and get that notification. Get out there and vote next year. Share your thoughts on what these best beers, best styles, best breweries are, because you are such a crucial and integral part of this entire Best in Beer issue year after year after year. Next week, we'll be back with the Critics List episode of the podcast where I pop on with Joe, with Alex Kidd, with Stan Hieronymus, with Kate Bernat, with Courtney Eisman, and talk about each of their favorite beers of the year. We appreciate you, listening through this and listening to us share our editor picks, your reader picks, all of these things that make up our best of the year. Joe, do you have any thoughts before we check out of here?
No, just congratulations to all the brewers who've made these fantastic beers that were just delighted our judges and us at the table. It's such a privilege that we get to do this. And again, it's fun to see that process starting to unfold all over again now with our spring issue is going to be the malt issue. The invitation's out there, beerandbrewing.com, help center. You'll find any instructions on how to submit if you want to get into it.
One of the big things that we try to approach on this, we don't gatekeep our list. We allow everybody to submit beers. We do ask that you be a subscriber to the magazine if you're going to send us beer to review, because we would appreciate some support in that regard. But at the same time, we don't charge an entry fee for sending beer to the magazine to consider for reviewing these issues. We are trying to taste you through all of the diversity of beer that exists out there in the world, exists out there in the United States, but also exists out there in an international spectrum. We want to do the best job that we can to bring you the best content around beer and about the act and art and craft of brewing. And we appreciate everything the brewers do to support us in that and be able to bring you this kind of content. Joe, I think that's a great place to close. Do you want to read us out?
Yeah. For years, G&D Chillers has chilled the beers you love, partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across the country. Increase fermenter capacity sustainably with Firm Cap Eco from Kerry. Flavor your lineup and streamline your sourcing by heading to oldorchard.com/brewer. ProBrew currently features short lead times between 2 to 4 weeks for their in-stock Pro-Fill rotary can fillers. Omega's thiolized yeast are a new tool for brewers to bring intense guava and passion fruit aromas out of your malt and hops. Build your complimentary sample box today at perfectpuree.com/beer. And $3 per pound ordered of the Yakima Chief Hops Pink Boots blend will be donated directly to the Pink Boots Society. Go to beerandbrewing.com and click on the subscribe button to let us know this content matters to you.
You almost nailed it, Joe. It's oldorchard.com/brewer, and it's perfectpuree.com/beer. So as long as people get those URLs correctly,
damn it.
Next year, Joe, you're going to nail it.
Yeah.
Okay, start practicing now.
All right.
We're going to get this figured out. Anyway, thanks to all of you all who have listened through this. This is one of our longest episodes of the year, as it is every year. But we love celebrating. We love the opportunity of this. There's so much challenge. There's so much negativity in the world that this is such a special opportunity for us to celebrate creativity, to celebrate technical prowess, to celebrate the beauty, the art of talented craftspeople across the spectrum of beer making, and lift up all of these fantastic beer makers wherever they are across the country, across the world, and say, hey, look at this. There's amazing work being done. There's amazing things being made in the world of craft beer. Craft beer's time is not up yet, even if larger mainstream media wants to write some narrative because of some craft beer brewers are struggling right now. Just because there are some headwinds against small business in this country does not mean that the last chapter of craft beer has been written. And all of these 20 beers of the year are proof that creativity has not stopped moving forward. All of the beers that have scored highly throughout the year for craft beer and brewing are proof that there's still much more to be written in this history of craft beer, that craft brewers aren't done. So keep brewing, keep making great beer, keep blowing our minds, and keep challenging all of our assumptions about what we think we know, because every year we learn new things. Every year our assumptions get challenged, and every year you brewers out there, change our minds about things that we thought that we knew, that we realized that we don't know. So keep doing that. Keep challenging us. Keep feeding back to us, and let's keep making craft beer just a little bit better. Cheers.
Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.